Game development can be hard. Sometimes making changes or adding and removing features can create unintended consequences, and today we'll be looking at one of those consequences. So the target dummy was added in Warfare 1, and let's say it has some very interesting qualities. So if you shoot it now, you can see I'm getting a hit marker, and it's gone. It's as simple as that. You just shoot the thing and it takes damage, and after a set amount of time it will regenerate. You can shoot off its arms and its body, and eventually it will just come back. Now this is all well and good, but where does the exploit come in? Well, the target dummy has some very interesting mechanics when it's projected. If I now walk into it, you'll see, even though it's a projection, I'm still getting a collision. Now this isn't the only thing. If I come over here and I shoot it, you can see that I'm still getting the hit marker. So I've placed some blocks behind it. You see I'm shooting the target dummy, and the blocks behind it aren't taking any damage. Just for example, if I shoot that, you'll see I get the little impact spots. However, if I shoot the dummy, there's no input spots behind it, so this blocks weapons. Now this doesn't just interact with players. Oh, it's spawning in a small ship, so you can see it's stuck between the drills, so I'm unable to move. And just as a test, I've attached a Gatling gun to the front of my ship, and you can see the weapon fire still collides with the target dummy. Now so far, the only downsides I've found to this exploit is that it doesn't interact with large grids, only with small grids. But that doesn't mean it can't be the right weapon or defense in the right hands. I should also mention that this is an ungrindable block, meaning that you can't move through it and you also can't grind it. Now you can pass through the bottom part of it, but the majority of the top section of the block is completely impenetrable. So I guess the real question is, what kinds of weapons can we create with this, and what kind of defenses can we also make with this? Let's have a look. Now before we go over the uses of this, we should probably go over how you can do this exploit. So if you get any target dummy, you paste it in and you create a blueprint of it, pressing Ctrl B. So you probably want to rename it something helpful like target dummy. And once you've got the blueprint, all you need is any projector. Make sure you set your blueprint to target dummy. And there you go, one impenetrable target dummy. Now obviously you can take this further. Here I've placed 32 target dummies in a row with a series of light armor panels below them just so they can all be on the same line. And I'm going to use this to create what the community has referred to as the clang beam. So over here I've built a custom turret. If you want to see how to make your own custom turrets, check out my video on building custom turrets here. This is effectively just a custom turret with the projector on the end. So if I turn this projector on by pressing 2, you can see it projects out the target dummies, and if I move up to them, you can see I'm still facing a collision. So every one of these is going to collide with whatever comes into contact with them. So if I spawn in a mining ship here, go back to my custom turret controller, you can see now if I move the custom turret controller down, I can slowly push the mining ship towards the ground. As you can see there, when I move my mouse too fast, the projections phase through the ship. Now, when the target dummy projections are inside of a ship, they have another interesting effect. If I now go over to the ship, get into the cockpit, try and wiggle around, try and thrust, I cannot move whatsoever. I am completely trapped. If I went to the gyroscopes, just to prove to you, put override controls on and just set the roll to max, and now if I go back to this custom turret controller and turn off the projector, spinning around completely fine. Turn it back on, stopped. Turned off, spinning around, on, stopped. I can't describe how cool this is, if I'm honest. It's like a tractor beam within Space Engineers. You can effectively lock any small ships in place, providing that you're actually looking at them, and they have absolutely no way of escape. I'm wriggling my mouse around frantically now. I'm thrusting all of the thrusters in every direction. I have no way of moving out of this whatsoever. As you also saw as well, you can use this to nudge ships. So you wanted to move a ship around slowly using this. You can use it as quite a precise tool for moving. As long as you move the mouse very slowly, you can see I'm slowly moving this ship towards the ground. But obviously if you move it too fast, you phase through the ship and then you're tractor beaming it again. Now in theory with this, you could potentially use this to reel in ships. So I built a second version of the clang beam, and the hope is with this version, as I've put it on a piston, that I'll be able to reel in the ship I'm aiming at. So I've turned the beam on, so pointing at the ship, so we're going to now retract the piston. There you go. If you go slowly, it looks like you can do it. Obviously it would need a lot more fine tuning and I'm having to constantly reposition it. But in principle it works, is my point. You could use this to suck in ships. I guess by the same principle, if I now turn it on the other way, I can use it to push ships away. Speaking of pushing things, have you considered pushing the like and subscribe button? This isn't actually that bad. It's more effective than I thought it would be. Obviously we're going quite slow, but if I reversed it now, we should get the same effect in reverse. Yep. This is like the world's slowest scorpion get over here, isn't it? So I've attached a version of the clang beam to this ship here, and I'm hoping, if I now turn it on, so this turret has AI, whereas the other ones didn't. So now, in theory, if I move it very slowly forward, it should track the ship. So you can see I'm moving around. It's slowly moving to follow the ship. This would be my idea of what the practical applications of this would be for combat. As you fly past a ship, you'd have this extend out as far as it could. So currently I'm only going 32 blocks. In theory, you'd need to be going something like 800 to get the most out of this. It targets small ships, it locks them in place, and then once they're locked in place, you are free to rain havoc on them. You could even have railguns on the custom turret so that it locks the small ship in place, and then you're able to fire all of your weapons, railguns, artillery, whatever, at the ship and just immediately annihilate it. I was kind of trying to see if I could use this like I used the piston one to move the ship around. It doesn't seem to work, although I do feel like I'm getting resistance on pulling the ship. I'm like slowly being pulled back. So be careful if you're trying to move a small ship that's heavier than you, as I think you might struggle. And as before, I am completely stuck, no thrusting, no moving whatsoever. I will mention that I had to change the settings on this. So it's currently set to default, but I had to set it to power systems in order to get this to work, because in power system you see it updates and moves around. If I set it back to default, you'll see it kind of does this glitching around thing. I'm not really sure what that is. I'm sure that's a custom turret controller quirk rather than a quirk of the projection. But it's just worth noting that you need to set this to one of the other settings. I did actually test, and weapons works as well. It just points at the drills, which isn't too helpful, but it doesn't have that weird glitchy around effect that the other one has. So we've tried offense, now let's try defense. So the target dummies here are all in a row. They don't take damage as before. So in theory, I've lined them up so that they'll give more protection. So there's here and then there's a gap. In theory, if I shoot from this side, they should hit this. Now, obviously, this isn't going to be an impervious defense. In order to do that, I need to layer much more of these target dummies. But as free armor, I don't think anyone can complain, really. So in theory, if I aim right in the middle of one of these plates, it does seem to be going through, actually. That might have just been bad aiming on my part. Let's try again. There you go. So that there, I'm at hitting the target dummy pretty much every shot. Occasional shots are going through and hitting the armor. It's definitely a problem with the angle, but placing these in a row would require me to place like 1 billion projectors. But I think there are definitely versions of this you could build that could give you complete invulnerability to damage. Because as you can see here, I'm hitting this target dummy. Obviously, if I move the map cursor a little bit, I then start hitting the blocks behind again. But even the occasional shot of the blocks for these target dummies could be invaluable. Those seconds in between you getting hit and you losing your ship. It's also important to mention that due to the mannequins interacting with small grids, you've created like a net or small grids, so they cannot get through it. So if you're being harassed by fighters, this would be an easy way to stop them from getting in with a certain perimeter of the base. You just set up one of these, they fly into it, and oh, they're stuck. Imagine if you had 5 of these, there was a ship just flying wrong, you activated them all, and bam, the ship is now captured in your net. It can't get out the front, can't get out the back, can't get out anywhere. You've just captured an entire ship intact. Don't forget, this also interacts with players, so if you make the net tight enough, you could also stop players from getting through it as well. Again, this is one of these things that require a lot of experimentation to get the most out of it, but in theory, if you had enough projectors and enough time, you could make this so it was basically impervious not only to ships, but also to weapons fire. Just in case any of you are curious, missiles also hit the field. Now obviously because they do it in AoE, they still damage behind the field. Let me see if I fire the rocket now, it blows up against the barrier, meaning that your base is basically safe from the AoE that they deliver, and that's effectively infinite HP for your ships. So I'm just about to test if artillery gets blocked with a shield. It's a bit difficult to tell due to the way it works. In order to make the fairest test possible, I've stuck the barrel of the artillery shell inside of a target dummy, so hopefully this will give us the best indication of whether or not it actually does collide with them. And it looks like it exploded right in front of it, so it does collide with them. It's just very difficult to test that. I'm not expecting this to work due to the way the railgun functions, but I'll give it a test anyway, because the railgun shoots through blocks, so the projectile keeps going until it runs out of damage, and because these don't have HP, my presumption is that it's just going to fly through them. So let's give it a test. 3, 2, 1. Yeah, so you'd still be susceptible to railgun fire. They can't fire through the target dummies. But everything else, in theory, the target dummies could block, meaning that the target dummies could be, in theory, an effective shield against all weapon types apart from railguns. So, that's just a brief overview of the Clang Beam exploit. What do you guys think of this exploit? Have you got any other ideas of how it could be used? Let me know with a comment below. And as always, like and subscribe for more Space Engineers content.